Okay. Once again.
Yes, no.
Okay, good. So, um, so today the paper is about how Swami Deśikaṉ's Tamil poetry shows us that he was not just an Ācārya, but also an Āḻvār. He can be called an Āḻvār. And this talk is inspired by a statement made by Navalpakam Vasudevacharya Swami in one of his Upanyasams. Uh, he said that in view of the quality of Swami Deśikaṉ's poetry, Tamil poetry, he should also be considered as an Āḻvār. So I was very intrigued by this, and I thought that I should explore this topic. And so I started looking into his Tamil Prabandham, and very useful was, and let me begin by showing my Kritagnatai. My Tamil Deśikaprabandham Santai teacher Nirmala Malulan, who's here, and also Vaijayanti Mukundan, my Deshika Stotram Santai teacher, Divakara Taniyan, who taught me the basics of Tamil poetry, etc. All these people helped me to understand, to like and appreciate Swami Deśikaṉ's Tamil poetry. But before we move on, very basic things about Swami Deśikaṉ that most of us know, but it can never harm to say a few things about him. So he was born as Venkatanathan and lived in the 14th century. So he was a philosopher, theologian, poet, and many other things. So here the focus will be mostly on Swami Deśikaṉ, the poet. But even in his poetry, there'll be plenty of philosophy, plenty of theology, plenty of other things. Anyway, he has composed in Sanskrit, Tamil, and Tamil only verse, Mani Pravala, only prose, and also in Prakrit. And he was so good at many different genres. He's composed Vyakhyanas, Rahasya Granthas, Kavyas, Stotras, and so on and so forth. So, what about his Tamil poetry? Before we move on, his Tamil poetry. Should I say it now? Maybe I should say it later on. So as I said, the main aim of this paper is to explore Swami Deśikaṉ's Tamil poetry, to enjoy his Tamil poetry. So if you don't know his Tamil poetry, it's a good occasion to discover some of his verses. If you already know his Tamil poetry very well, it's a very good occasion to enjoy them together. So as I said, through this, I needed to have a topic, not just present verses by the Swami to you. So the point of view, the perspective that I have taken here would be Swami Deśikaṉ being a Tamil poet, composing Tamil poetry not just as an Āḻvār, as an Ācārya. He was an Ācārya, we all know that, but also as an Āḻvār. His poetry is so good that he can be considered an Āḻvār as well. So before we can proceed, let's see what the traditional differences between an Āḻvār and an Ācārya have been believed to be. So an Āḻvār delves deep in bhakti, behaves according to the experiences that Bhagavan gives them. So they can be happy one moment, sad at another moment, angry and jealous. It all depends on the kind of experience that they have. Sometimes they may even seem to go against the Shastras and their love for God. For example, some of the Āḻvārs have performed multiple Sharanagatis, which technically is not allowed. Some of them have, worshipped minor deities, but, to get Krishna. So there are explanations. The Āḻvārs are very different from us, but most of the things they do is due to the overwhelming power of bhakti. And they also composed in Tamil. Let's leave aside Mukundamala and the question of Mukundamala's authorship. Other than that, the Āḻvārs composed in Tamil. And what about an Ācārya? An Ācārya prioritizes the Shastras, prioritizes the instruction of the Shastras and other important knowledge. And one of the accepted definitions of Ācārya in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya is Achinoti hi Shastrarthan Ācārye sthapayatyapi Swayam Acharate Yasmat Tasmad Ācārya Uchyate. So one who comprehends the meanings of the scriptures, so he understands it very well, establishes them in practice. So it's not somebody who just preaches and doesn't follow. No, he should practice what he preaches, basically, and sets an example by following them himself. That's a proper Ācārya. And the Sri Vaishnava Ācārya, including and especially Swami Deśikaṉ, was one such Ācārya. So these Acharyas compose work in different genres, in Sanskrit predominantly, but also in other languages like Tamil, Manipravalam, and further languages. So let us now see in what ways Swami Deśikaṉ's poetry shows us that he had both an Acharya side, inevitably, but also an Āḻvār side. Now, before we proceed, we need to know how much, Swami Deśikaṉ knew Nālayara Divya Prabandham, how much he valued and appreciated it. I'm just giving a few points. There are many, many more points. We won't have the time for everything here. So he has composed commentaries on a few works like Munivahana Bhogam on Amalanadipiran, but also Nigama Parimalam on the Thiruvaimuri, which unfortunately is lost, but also commentary on select verses in his Chillare Rahasyams, for example. He has provided a summary of the Thiruvaimuri decades in Sanskrit verse. That's his Brahmanopanishad Tatparya Ratnavali. And he's also used innumerable quotations from the Divya Prabandham in his works whenever he needed pramanam. Of course, he's composed the Paduka Sahasram, which is on Ranganatha's Paduka. Ranganatha's Padukas are Āḻvār after all. So it also shows a link with the Āḻvārs. And then he's also composed a poem called Prabandha Saram, whose authorship and date, etc., has been contested at least by one academic I know, but let's put that aside. Let's just have a look at what he says in his Prabandha Saram. He speaks of himself as Sandamihu Tamil Marayon. So he of the beautiful Tamil Vedas, not just a Brahmin who knows the Sanskrit Vedas, but also the Tamil Vedas or Tamil Veda, if we are only thinking in terms of the Thiruvaimuri. And then he ends also by saying, Nālayaramu Madiyongal Vaalve. So the 4,000 verses are felicity or life itself for us servants. Moreover, he also establishes how important the Tamil Vedas are for the proper understanding of the Sanskrit Vedas. So in this verse from the Adhikara Sangraham, Poihai Muni Budattar Peyarvar, Tanpurnal Varum Puruhesan Vittu Chittan, Tuyya Kulasekaran Nampananadan, Tondaradipudi Marisai Vanda Sodi, Vayamellam Maraivalanga Valvelendum, Mangayarkon, Enriverhal Mahildu Padum, செய்ய தமிழ் மாலைகள் நாம் தெளிய போதி தெளியாத மறைநிலங்கள் தெளிகின்றோமே. So here he clearly says, of course, he lists all the 10 Āḻvārs, leaving aside Andal and Madhurya, who fit into a different category. He said that by reciting clearly the excellent Tamil garlands, meaning their pasurams, and the last line in the translation, he says, we understand the parts of the Vedas that were not clear to us. So this is the importance that he gives to the Tamil Vedas, the Nālayara Divya Prabandham. So now that I have established both the more or less, not all the points, but at least some points of how acquainted and how appreciative Swami Deśikaṉ was of the Nālayara Divya Prabandham, and also somewhat looked at the definitions of what an Āḻvār is and what an Acharya is. I'm sure there are more layers and more depth to that, but this is a starting point. Let's now proceed. So the plan for today is to first of all focus on Swami Deśikaṉ's poetry. So I will give you a few information about what he has composed, the length, the meters that he has used, and also read one sample verse to show you how absolutely breathtaking his poetry can be in Tamil. And then once I'm done, I'll focus on Swami Deśikaṉ's poetry. Again, it's going to be only Tamil poetry today. How he composes like an Acharya, the themes that he chooses, etc. shows that, of course, he's an Acharya. And then finally focus on how he follows in the footsteps of the Āḻvārs and himself becomes an Āḻvār to compose some exquisite poetry, bhakti poetry on his favorite deities. So, So Swami Deshikan's Tamil poetry. I think that it is less known and less appreciated than his Sanskrit poetry. At least let me speak from an academic point of view. I think it's generally that's the case. For example, in 1941, V.V. Srinivasa Iyengar, in his preface to an edition of the Deśikaprabandham, says that the great merit of Swami Deshikan's Sanskrit compositions overshadowed his achievements in Tamil, and that in his followers do not show proper appreciation of his place in Tamil language and literature. I think it's been 80 plus years since this comment was made, and I think it's not entirely wrong. Because when we think of Tamil poets, Tamil literature, our first thought, or even second or third thought, does not go to Swami Deshikan, and it's a pity because his Tamil poetry, as I said, is now, what has he composed that is so good? To begin with, there are about 405 extant verses, about 405 of them, because some of them are repeated in some of the works, and he composed more of them. Some of them got lost. I will give more information in a while. So these 405 verses are collectively known as the Deśikaprabandham, as opposed to you have the Āḻvār. So we also have the Deśikaprabandham, out of which you have 236 verses, which were compiled from verses from his Rahasya Granthas, Chillare Rahasyams, etc., but also from the Rahasya Trayasaram, compiled under different names like Adhikara Sangraham or and all that. And there are also about 169 verses from self-contained poems. What is self-contained? Simply independent poems that do not come from a larger work. So on the whole, we have around 405 verses. And from what I understand, these were compiled by Swami Deshikan's son, Kumara Varadaguru, Swami Kumara Varadaguru, and his also his disciple, Brahmatantra Swatantra Swami, who was the founder of the Parakala Matha. I don't know much about this, and I hope to learn more about this compilation process. But anyway, the main topics, well, there are praises to Bhagavan, there are philosophical ideas, theological contents, shastric contents, etc. We will explore some of them. Swami has used about 20 different meters. It's quite something. You can be good at Tamil poetry, more or less good, use 4 or 5 meters. There are some people who call themselves poets just by using 4 or 5 meters. I can compose poetry verses in Sanskrit, but I can only use the Anushtubh meter, you see? But no, Swami composed in 20 different meters in Tamil, although his favorites were the Kattalai Kalitturai and Ensir Ācārya Viruttam. Now, this information you can find in any of his editions of the Deśikaprabandham. So, to the right, you see a list of his prabandhams in Tamil. So here you have also the number of verses that is given. So it all amounts to 405. And there are supposed to be 24 prabandhams, which is a parallel to the 24 prabandhams also found in the Nālayara Divya Prabandham, although in the next slide, I will tell you that some of them got lost. And on this slide, you can see all the different the meters that he has used in Tamil, absolutely stunning, I would tend to think. Now, I'm not going to read out this verse, but we know about Swami Deshikan's missing poems in Tamil. For example, thanks to a list that he himself makes in his Navamani Male, he lists all the poems that he composed for the Lord of Tiruvahendrapuram. And here in the list, you find, I've given it in blue, Pandu, Karal, Ammane, Usal, Esal. These are minor genres in Tamil. They don't exist anymore. We have unfortunately lost them. And we have also lost, the Mummadi Kovai thankfully is there, but we have lost at least 20 verses from the Mummadi Kovai as well. And sometimes I think he has given a list so that we know we have lost them. What if there are other poems by Swami Deshikan we have lost and we don't know about them because he hasn't given a list for the other poems? What to do? Now, I think I have given you a very general idea of what he has composed. I wish I could say more, but there isn't much time. So I should actually proceed and read out a verse, a sample verse to show how beautiful his Tamil verses are. So this is a description of a rushing river, the river Begavati. This verse is from Meviradamanyam, which itself comes from the Sri Hastagiri Mahatmyam by Swami Deśikaṉ, which is considered a Rahasya Grantha. So, of course, it tells you about the glory of Hastagiri. And here, we almost have the vision of not a photographer, but a videographer who captures the floods of a river. And then I'll tell you its movement and its destruction of everything on the path, and then stops right at the end. And I will tell you stop by what. So it's very, very visual. And the background story, for those who don't know, I'm sure everybody knows, is that Brahma decides to perform an Ashwamedha Yajna in Hastagiri. He needs his chief wife, Saraswati, to perform the Yajna. But she is angry with him, and she's sitting on the banks of the river Saraswati doing tapas. So he sends their son Vasishtha, tells him, go bring her. And she refuses, and then some other things happen, and she gets really annoyed because Brahma decides to go ahead with the yajna with his other wives. So she turns into a river, now known as Vegavati, and then decides to destroy Brahma's yajna. So she starts crushing. So you will feel all this action, this power, this destruction of the river in this verse. Let me recite this. As I said, my Sante teacher is here. I hope I recite it properly. Annavadival asayumanna nadayal uyarum annavarase rivaruval attanayan uttidanayatidana butti puriyal nannade vida nadamidenna nadaba nadubu nannu kubaderi ilival narpadihal karpurala varpuda marutkadinal annade vida idamil unnadi siravihadamannu giripudamidiya அட்டவிட இற்று விழ முற்றும் விழி உற்றடைய விட்டருகுற அன்னனய சீரையனிதென்னவென விழாவமரர் மன்னுபதியேறி மகிழ அச்சுதன் அனைத்தனுவில் அத்திசை வரத்தகையவற்றணுகினாள். So before we move on to focus on the power of this poetry, the poetic excellence of this particular verse, let me just very quickly go through the contents. There is plenty to say on the contents, but today we will only focus on the poetic beauty of this verse. So, as she, Saraswati, who rides upon the best among lofty hamsas, fair like a hamsa, with the gait of a swaying hamsa, she who would not reply, so be it, to the words of the good son Vasishtha, of the father Aja Brahma, moved as if it were a dance, unerring from the proper course, thinking that this summon is a play act of Brahma's that apparently does not swerve from good behavior. She would climb up and down the hillocks located in the middle with the wonderful speed of the wind, so that rocks rolled in the good flat lands and in those that weren't, so that the uneven mountain summits of no mean height, without any spot where rocks did not roll, crumbled, so that sides of the mountains there crumbled down. She thoroughly directed her glance everywhere and approached the sacrificial pit. So she's flooding everywhere, destroying everything on her path, creating chaos. And then what happened? Brahma, with such goodness and excellence, wondered what this was. As the immortals at the festival rejoiced, ascending to their permanent abodes. Well, Brahma didn't know what was happening. He's initially very, very proud of himself and his tapas. He doesn't know what's happening. And the devas, the amaras, they're supposed to be immortals. They're super happy to save their lives and run away to their abodes up in heaven. Who's there to help? Achyuta came there to stop her in the form of a dam. She, Saraswati, came close, ebbing away. So the floods suddenly take a break, they break, and they disperse. As Saraswati sees that Achyuta, who never gives up his devotees, appears. And this is the Yathoktari Perumal, as you can see on the photo. So the river, the floods cease, they ebb away. So now that we know the meanings, there are plenty of meanings. We could discuss the meanings of this first, but let's move on from the point of view of an academic. Let's see how we can, undo and redo and see all the nuances that this verse contains in terms of poetry. So Swami has used an 11 seed Ācārya Viruttam. And you see, this is 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines. And each lines are, they have 2 parts. The first has 6 Cs. The next line, next part of the line has got 5 Cs. So you probably heard it when I recited, it's perfectly rhythmic, as you can see and feel the flow of the floods of this river. But each line has 11 Cs, which I think creates a little irregularity because it's an uneven number. You see, if it's 6 and 6, it's perfectly regular. There is a slight irregularity. I was wondering why. Of course, I'm an academic. I would ask myself this sort of question. And then I thought, this is completely intentional because this unevenness introduces the idea that the pace of the river, its might, is there, of course, but also its anger, its disruptive and destructive power mars the regularity of the rhythm as you shift from 6 Cs to 5 and then to 6 again and then 5 again. I don't know if it gets very technical, but suffices to see visually. I have given all the syllables which are Laghu Puril in blue, you can see it here, and also all the syllables which are Nidil, Guru in red here. For those who know Tamil poetry, you see Kuvalangai, 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 Kuvalangani, Kuvalangai, 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 Kuvalangani. And then it repeats. It's so regular. You can see that from the colors that I have given to you. And it's not just about the meter. If you go beyond that, you can see it's also about rhymes. What is poetry if the rhyme is not there? If the sounds are not good, there are no alliterations, it wouldn't even be poetry. You have all this here. So in red, you can see the Edugai rhymes. It's the 2nd syllable rhyme. Swami does not miss a single one of them. You can see all the Edugai rhymes. And also what is called as secondary rhyme, Ina Edugai, that is also perfectly there. I have given that in blue here. As you can see, it occurs in the 2nd part of each line. And then there is also the Monai rhyme, which is the 1st syllable rhyme, which I have given here with, double underlining. So it's there everywhere and not just at the beginning of each line and each half line, but also elsewhere. You have here a perfect sample of Tamil poetry by Swami. So here you go. So this first part, I hope to show you that Swami has composed excellent poetry in Tamil and wish to give you some idea in case you didn't know what he has composed in Tamil, and I hope that I have done so. So it's time to move on to the second part and discover or enjoy together Swami Deśikan's poetry when he composes like an Ācārya, because he was an Ācārya through and through. Even when he composes like an Āḻvār, he still is an Ācārya and he still instructs because that's part of his nature. So let's begin having a look at his poetry. As I said, he's an Ācārya and he says it himself. He says he goes in Swami Ramanuja's path himself. So there will be a lot of instruction happening. So in this verse, which is quite well known from the Paramapada Sopanam, Swami mentions how his words are full of Swami Ramanuja's ideas and thoughts, etc. Of course, here he refers to the fragrance from the kitchen of Ramanuja, which is a reference to Kidambi Achan, in whose Vamsham came his own Ācārya, Āḻvār. So direct transmission of knowledge from Ramanuja to Deśika, of course. So all this knowledge about the tattvas or the rahasyas, etc., is going to be there in his works, whatever the genre, whatever the language he's going to write in. So this verse then, Adarpul Arasinum Andanar Martinum Innamuda Kadal Palli Tanninum Kaviri Ulla Muhanda Piran Idaipillayahi Uraitadu Uraikum Yativaranar Madaipalli Vandamanam Yengal Vartayul Manniyade. So the fragrance that came from the kitchen of the best among ascetics, Ramanuja, who speaks the words of the Lord. So Ramanuja himself only says what Krishna says, what Narayana says, and Vedanta Deśikaṉ, Swami, says what Ramanuja says, meaning he also says what Ramanuja says and what Narayana says. So if we go back to this verse, so Ramanuja, who speaks the words of the Lord, whose heart delighted in the Kaveri, meaning that's Ranganatha, but also probably by extension the other Divya Deshams, more so than in the belligerent king of birds, that is Garuda, his Vahana, in the wealth of the Brahmins, which is the Vedas, or in the bed of the ocean of sweet nectar, or the milk ocean, and who spoke becoming a cowherd. Krishna, he spoke the Gita, of course. So Swami says that fragrance of Ramanuja's words has abided in our words. So sure, he's going to compose like an Ācārya. He already says it. I'm following in the footsteps of Ramanuja. Very, very quickly, I just wanted to point out that even in this verse, apparently, when you read it, you think it's beautiful, but there is much more than meets to the eye. It seems, and Navanitham Swami points out that Swami actually, when he mentions the different, when he has the different epithets of Narayana here, he actually alludes to the five forms of Narayana here. That was just a tidbit. We can't really spend too much time on this either, unfortunately. Now, what does an Ācārya teach? An Ācārya teaches about the three rahasyas, three tattvas, Artha Panchakam, etc. And Swami Deśikaṉ does it all. You have some examples here where he speaks very, very in simple language about the three tattvas, but also the most important theory of Visishtadvaita, which distinguishes it from the other sampradayas, which is the Sharira, Shariri, Bhava, and God, Perumal being the Antaryami, and that kind of thing. So, Uyirum Udalum Udalaha Vongi, Tayirvennai Taraniyodu Undan, Payiril Kadaipol Asurarai Kaindan Tan Peigil, Vadaipol Emmasiriyar Vakum. So the first part says, rising with the sentient soul, so that's the chit, and the insentient body, that's the achit, as his body. So he also mentions the third tattva, which is the Ishvara, and in this sentence he also establishes the Sharira, Shariri, Bhava, I think. He, meaning Narayana, swallowed the earth along with curds and butter. Our Ācārya's words are bracelets. Vadai can be bracelets, but it can also mean conch, because Perumal has both in his hands, in the hand of the Lord who destroyed the asuras like weeds among the crops. So if it's a conch, then we can say that the Ācārya's words destroyed ignorance and gives knowledge. The conch, we know the Shankha gives knowledge, and so do the Ācārya's, the Purvācārya's words. So here's a beautiful verse which very seamlessly speaks about the Tattvatrayam. And then he also speaks about the Artha Panchakam. So you have a whole poem called the Arutta Panchakam. And this particular verse is about the Upayam among the 5 categories of knowledge, and specifically Prapatti. I'm not going to read the whole verse. Suffices to show that here in this verse, for example, Swami speaks of Shri twice, not once, but twice. And it's very theologically very important, because he intends clearly to say that Shri is also present with Narayana during the Jivatman's Sharanagati, which differs from other sampradayas. And what is also very interesting here is that, look at this expression, Ahalagillen Endurayum. So Swami, even when he's speaking about Artha Panchakam, etc., the Āḻvār's words and thoughts are still with him. So all of us would know, as soon as we hear Ahalagillen Endurayum, we remember the Thiruvaimuri 6:10:10. So the Āḻvār's thoughts are always there in Swami, even when he composes verses like an Ācārya. Now, another here, for example, he also gives shastric injunctions um, in verse. How does he even manage um, shastric texts? I don't know. I'm sorry if I offend anyone. Shastric texts are quite dry. Do this, do that, do this, do that. But Swami makes it sound so good, and that it makes one want to say, okay, I'll listen to you because you are saying this so beautifully. Look at this verse, which is from the Sri Vaishnava Dinasari, which is a Dinacharya for a Sri Vaishnava man. All the activities that Sri Vaishnava man is supposed to undertake in a day. And this particular verse comes in the Ijjai part, in the worship part. And Swami Deśikaṉ here says how Perumal should be, welcomed and surrendered unto and worshipped. And for this, he gives a set of similes, beautiful similes, which I think enhance not just the contents of the verse, but also the beauty of the poem. ಬರುವದೋರುರವೆನ ಬಳರಿಳ ಬರಸೆನ ಮರುವನನ್ ಮಹನೆನ ವನಮದ ಕರಿಯನ அருவிலை மணியன அடியவர் அடைபவர் அருகணை இறைவனை அருகணையுடனே. So the devotees, the translation. So this is a philological translation, so it is what it is. So the devotees do surrender with worship, thinking of the Lord who remains close by as a special relative who visits. So this is how we are supposed to treat Perumal. Even our Salagrama Sri Murtis, just because he's close by doesn't mean that it's nothing, he's nothing. No, you ought to show the right amount of respect and affection, etc. And he says how, as a special relative who visits, as a thriving young king, as a good son worthy of embrace, as a wild rutting elephant, as a rare precious gem. So there you go. He can even make shastric injunction sound so very good, and it's so briefly put, beautifully put, and he does that throughout that particular prabandham. And also, for example, other injunctions. This is from the Āhāra Niyamam. He instructs people on what can be eaten and what can't be eaten. Can you imagine? This can be a boring list. No, even that boring list comes out as very nice poetry. So, Vaayilalla Vaayininal Vanda Sorum, Parahumudal Ahadin Juraita Sorum, Vaayinindrum விழுமவைத்தாம் பட்ட சோறும் வாய்கொண்ட கவளத்தின் மிகுந்த சோறும் தீயவர் கண் படும் சோறும் தீதர் சோறும் சீரையுரை தும்மிலிவை பட்ட சோறும் நாய் முதலானவை பார்க்கும் தீண்டும் சோறும் நாள் தூய்தல்லா சோறும் நன்னா சோரே. So I have given a translation here. So you're very welcome to take a screenshot and read it. But this is just one verse among a set of verses which says what you're not allowed to eat. But I just gave it to you to show you that he is capable of even writing poetry out of shastric injunctions. Now, I think this is the ultimate verse. This is the ultimate verse in Tamil by Swami Deśikaṉ. And I thought that even though I may not have the time to read a translation or go through the ideas found in this, I should at least read it, recite it to you, which is quite a challenge because as you can see, this is, believe me, this is just 4 lines. This is a quatrain, 4 lines with each line containing 28 seers. So it's not the easiest to recite, but let me try so that you can see how beautiful this poetry is. Although this verse, technically speaking, is a praise of Varadaraja using the ideas found in the Brahma Sutras. Okay, so it's the last thing one would expect, but this shows the absolute poetic genius of Swami. So let me read this out. சித்த சித்தன விரித்துரைத்தனவனை தமைத்துறையும் இறைவனார் சிறிய பெரிய உருவடைய உடலமென நடலம் இலதிலகு நிலையினார் சித்திரத்தெழிலை ஒத்த பத்தரோடு முத்தர் பித்தி எனும் உணர்வினார் சிதைவில் மறை நெறியில் எரிய உருமுறைகள் முறிய சிறையறிய நிறைவினார் கத்துவிக்கவல கத்துவித்தை வழி கற்றவர் கசைவில் மாயனார் கபிலர் கணசரண சுகதர் சமணரர் வழிகள் அழியும் அருள்மொழியினார் கத்திலக்கிலு மறுக்குலத்திலு மச்சித்திலொக்குமுறு முதல்வனார் நம்மிடு கடிய 11 இருடிகமும் அடைய முடியும் அடியிருடியார் ஒத்தனை துலகும் ஒற்றி ஒற்றி வரும் இப்பவத்திசையின் இசைவினார் உருவம் அருவம் எனும் உலகின் முடுகிலதில் உவமை இலதிலகு தலைவனார் உத்தமப்படி வகுத்த வித்தைகளில் உத்தரிக்க குணவனார் உரிய கிரிசைகளில் அறியதொரு விறகு தெரிய விரையும் அவர் பரிவினார் தத்த சத்தெனும் அனைத்தனைத்த வினை தொத்தருக்க வல துணிவினார் சரியும் அளவில் உரியவரை அறிவறிய தமணி நெறி செருகு விறகினார் தத்துவத்திரளுதைத்தடைவு தத்துவிக்கும் அவர் தலைவனார் தருகை உணரும் அவர் சரணம் அணுக விடல் அறிய அருள் வரதரடியமே. So I have a translation, but it will take more time than I actually have in my possession. I also made a list of what each line and each part, each pada of each line summarizes in terms of the Brahma Sutras, by extension, the Sri Bhashyam here. But there is not enough time today, so we need to move on. And I'd just like to mention that I only gave you a few poems here in this category of Swami Deśikaṉ composing as an Ācārya, because he, of course, composes verses on the 3 Rahasyas. He summarizes the Bhagavad Gita, following in the footsteps of Yamunacharya. He gives the 12 names of Narayana along with the corresponding form, color, weapons, etc. He does Paramata Khandanam through verses. How can anybody use verses to do all these things? I don't know. That's probably because I'm not Swami Deśikaṉ. Now it's time to move on to the third and last part, Swami Deśikaṉ composing like an Āḻvār. I think I have already pointed out to you that even when he composes like an Ācārya, the influence of the Āḻvārs is always there. Their words, their ideas, their bhakti is there. But there are some verses specifically that completely show that he is just like an Āḻvār in the kind of bhakti that he feels, but also in the kind of poetry that he writes, very much inspired by the Āḻvārs. The most evident is when he writes verses in the Nayaki Bhavam. We speak of Deshika Nayaki like we speak of Parakala Nayaki and Parankusha Nayaki. I think we should be able to. Look at this verse from the Mummani Kovai. ஆர்க்கும் கருணை புழிவான் ஐந்தையில் பந்தமர்ந்த கார்கொண்டலை கண்ட காதல் புனமையில் கண்பனியா வேர்க்கும் முகிழ்விக்கும் விதிர்விதிர்க்கும் வெள்கி வெவ்வுயிர்க்கும் பார்க்கின்றவர்க்கு இது நாம் என் கொல் என்று பயிலுவமே. So the loving girl, akin to a peahen from the uplands, who saw the monsoon cloud that came and settled in Ayindai, for the sake of pouring compassion upon anyone, tears up, sweats, has goosebumps, trembles, feels bashful, sighs heavily. What can we say about this to those who see her? So this is a verse that comes from the point of view either of the mother or a friend, a sakhi, of a girl who is in love with my Perumal, our Perumal from Tiruvahindrapuram, who suddenly disappeared. So she's pining from him like a lovelorn girl, like any of the Āḻvārs do. And there is, of course, also a Swapadesha meaning, which precisely says this. So see, you have a sample of Deśikaṉ's words here, composing like an Āḻvār. And then Swami also sings about Vibhava avatars like the Āḻvārs do. The Āḻvārs sing of the Vibhava avatars. And the Āḻvārs also link up the Vibhava avatars with the Archavataras. And Swami does the same in this verse. Not sure I have the time to read it, but I can just begin reciting it, but then move on, just indicating a few things here. So this verse, மகரம் வளரும் அளவில் பௌவமடைய உற்றலைத்தனை வடிவு கமடம் எனவமர்ந்து கிரிதனை தரித்தனை மலியும் அசுரன் உரமிடந்து வசுதையை பெயர்த்தனை வலிகொளகுணன் உடல் பிளந்து மதலை மெய் குதித்தனை, and so on and so forth. So I also wanted you to discover the different meters, you see. I'm a Tamil scholar after all. So this verse, as I pointed out here, just by numbers, mentions all 10 avatars by Perumal, and then finally links it up with the Perumal in Tiruvahindrapuram, Devanatha Perumal. And very interesting is that in this, he also inserts elements from the Sthala Purana. From what I understand, you have allusions to the different tirthams which are associated with the Sthala Puranam of Tiruvahindrapuram as well. So Swami Deśikaprabandham never writes something because it's beautiful, because he feels bhakti, because he needs to praise the Vibhava avatars, etc. But there is also multiple layers, a depth of meanings that takes our breaths away. And like the Āḻvārs, he also sings, especially of the Archas. He was in love with many Archamurtis. I like to believe that Devanatha Swami was his favorite, but I'm sure he loved all the Swamis out there. So this is a beautiful poem, the first verse from the Mummani Kovai, in which he addresses Devanatha Perumal. So another point I wanted to make here is that Swami Deśikaṉ composes like an Āḻvār, but he goes beyond what the Āḻvārs do, because what a mother can do, well, what a child can do is more than what a mother can do. Thai, I don't know, Ittadi Panja, Putti Padinaradi Payo, that's what they say. So Swami Deśikaṉ, had inherited all the capacity and the bhakti of the Āḻvār, and he goes beyond what they did. And one such example is here. He is saying to an Achamurti Perumal in Tiruvahindrapuram, but very cleverly, although this is supposed to be a Mangala Shlokam for Devanatha Perumal, because it's the first verse of Mummani Kovai, the whole verse is about Sri. So he sings about Pirati here, Tayar here, rather than Perumal himself. Let me sing this verse, which I think is one of the sweetest verses by Swami Deśikaṉ. அருள் தரும் அடியற்பால் மெய்யை வைத்து தெருள் தர நின்ற தெய்வ நாயகா நின்னருள் எனும் சீரோர் அறிவையானதென இருள் செகையமக்கோரின் நொடி விளக்காய் மணிவரை அண்ணனின் திருகுருவில் அணியமராகத் தலங்களா இலங்கி நின்படிக்கெல்லாம் தன்படி ஏற்க அன்புடன் நின்னோடவதரித்தருளி வேண்டுரை கேட்டு மீண்டவை கேட்பித்து ஈண்டிய வினைகள் மாண்டிட முயன்று தன்னடி சேர்ந்த தமருனை அணுக நின்னுடன் சேர்ந்து நிற்குனின் திருவே. He says, O Devanayaka, who offer truth, or it could be your body, to the devotees and stand in order to give them knowledge. Your Shri, who is as if goodness, that is your grace, has turned into a matchless woman, who is a lamp with a unique sweet light for us, so that our darkness is destroyed, who shines as a garland on your ornamented chest, upon your auspicious form, akin to a sapphire mountain, who graciously descends along with you with love, in such a way that her ways match all of yours, who stands united with you, so that the servants who reach her feet approach you, listening to words of entreaty, having them heard in turn, taking pains so that their abundant sins perish. What does she do? That your Shri gives grace. So this verse has layers and layers and layers of meanings. Unfortunately, I can't get into the contents of this verse. If you really want to know, listen to Paraveri Balaji Swami's Upanyasams. I think he has 9 Upanyasams, over 9 hours, just for this particular verse, his Upanyasam for the GSPK. So now that I've just given you an idea of this verse, let me tell you here that this verse contains influences, allusions, references from key Sanskrit texts like the Sri Suktam, the Ramayanam, the Vishnu Puranam, Pancharatra texts, especially the Ahirbudnya Samhita, especially where he takes the definitions, the vyutpatti of the word Sri, and intertwines it in this poetry very, very beautifully, delicately. And also you have echoes from Ramanuja's Sharanagati Gadyam. But not just that, you also have echoes from the Āḻvār poetry. For example, from the Periya Tirumuri, where Tirumangi Āḻvār says, Adiyavarku meyyanahiya Deivanayakan. So Swami is inspired by these ideas, by these words. And there are more examples also of similar images, similes and metaphors, ideas, etc., that you find in other Āḻvār poetry, that you also find in this particular verse, but also in his other verses, like from the Thiruvaimuri as well. We can go on and get into details, but I think for the purpose of time, best to move ahead. As I said, Swami doesn't just compose like an Āḻvār, but he goes beyond. The Āḻvārs have not composed, I think, so far as I know, my knowledge is very limited, I agree, but I think usually they composed on the Mula Murti, but Swami goes beyond that and he composes on Dev Perumal, the Acha Murti, especially during his processions, so that he speaks of the different Vahanas, for example. And this is a super famous verse. Attigiri Arulala Perumal Vandar, Ane Pariterin Mel Arahar Vandar, Tachidanil Kankodukum Perumal Vandar, Karudavaram Tarudeva Perumal Vandar, Muttimarai Puriyum Muhilvannar Vandar, Moolamena Volamida Vallar Vandar, Uttaravedikkule Uditar Vandar, Umbar Torum Kadaludayar Vandar Tame. So this is Swami breaking out in ecstasy as he catches the sight of Deva Perumal coming out in procession. Arulala Perumal from Hastigiri has come, he says, the handsome lord upon an elephant, so that's Yane Vahanam and all that. A horse, a chariot has come. Perumal who gives sight or who gives protection in Kanchi has come. Deva Perumal who gives boons as we meditate on him has come. He who pours the shower of liberation has come. As the elephant cried in distress, saying, "Oh, pause, he who is capable came. He who appeared in the Uttaravedi altar has come. He whose feet are worshipped by the celestial has come." I see this verse as a celebration of the beauty of Perumal's Purapadu, the happiness that Swami feels at the sight of Deva Perumal. But of course, Swami has many layers added to it. And if I understand things correctly, this verse incorporates the meanings of all three rahasyas. And of course, Swami also does Charanagati in an Achamurti. From what I understand from Navanitam Swami's explanations, in the Navamanimala, you have two verses in that way. But I think I'll leave that for another day, because otherwise I'll go well beyond the allotted time. Suffices to say that Swami is an absolutely wonderful poet. No doubt his Sanskrit poet is very, very nice, accomplished, beautiful, no doubt. But his Tamil poetry is enchanting. He's such a good poet. Of course, he composes like an Āḻvār. When he composes like an Ācārya, the influence of the Āḻvārs is still there. And when he composes like an Āḻvār, the influence of the Ācārya is still there. So Swami is both definitely an Ācārya and an Āḻvār for all intents and purposes. And as I said, he doesn't just compose like an Āḻvār. He goes well beyond with the knowledge and the bhakti and everything that he has inherited from all the Purvacharyas, from all the Āḻvārs. He goes further and beyond. So I hope that within the time limits that I have been given, I have been able to show you, in case you were not aware or very well conversant of Swami Deśikaṉ's poetry, a sample of his Tamil poetry. And if you already knew of his Tamil poetry, I really hope that you enjoyed again sample verses and how I perceive these verses as an academic. Thank you so much.